way past time.
How expensive do I have to be?
Need I spell it out before you get it, baby?
Show me your soul.
And honey, I'll show you mine. I'll show you mine. Boy, I'm standing right here holding up a sign, shamelessly displaying my state of mind. But you walk right past me, pretending like you don't see what's yours for the taking tonight. Ooh,
Show me your soul.
baby, I'll show you mine.
Show me your soul.
Can't you see it's way past time?
How expensive do I have to be?
Need I spell it out before you get it, baby?
Show me your soul.
And honey, I'll show you mine.
I'm ready to show my soul. And I am going to do just that. What about you, y'all? I'm so excited, and I just can't hide it. Happy Friday, grand morning, grand rising. I'm so happy to be here. I should tell you every day, I don't think I'd rather be anywhere in the world except perhaps Fiji right now. It's 8 degrees here in Chicago, but then here with all of you. God bless you all, and thank you for sharing your soul and some of your day with us right here. Listen, I'm Lauren Michaels Harris, and welcome to today's installment of Bathrobe Moments. It's been a great week, and today is shaping up to be even greater, right? We are looking for the ER in everything. Just remember, you don't have to work with all 24 letters of the alphabet. Just get up every day and start with what you've already been blessed with. Look for that E and that R. Take bright into brighter. Take smart into smarter. And everything will get bigger, right? So that's the bell of purpose, everybody. You know what that means. When you hear it ring, it's your opportunity, my opportunity, our guest's opportunity to be a part of something greater than ourselves. What that means is when you hear the bell ring, something great is out there on the stage, on the floor, on the middle of the road, in the middle of the road, wherever you need to see it. But back your car up and maybe take a look at it. You might want to put it in the trunk and take it home with you. Those are golden nuggets. That's the bell of purpose. So when you also hear it, share the broadcast out, invite a friend, do a rain dance, send up a smoke signal, do something to pay it forward. The way and the manner in which you bless others, you got it. That's exactly the way the Creator will bless us. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, I want to just ask you guys, I heard it again this morning. I was in Clubhouse when I'm in the health club. I put that in. I'm really loving it. I'm in a meditation and prayer room every morning, Monday through Friday. And I heard it again. That Mercury retrograde thing. I'm going to do some research on that today because I think it could be a real thing. We're going to ask our PhD who's in the house today, Dr. Maurice W. Dorsey. Man, I'm going to just ask him what he feels about that. If you have some kind of insight, something you know about it, you want to share about this Mercury retrograde thing, will you please drop it inside of the comments? I appreciate that because I mean, it's been like, I feel like I've been sitting on a drum set all week, up, down, things going everywhere. And I'm not the only one. What about you? Any of that in your world today? Let's talk about it. Let's share our souls. The guest today, I'm really excited about this. I truly am. Whenever I have someone on the show or I meet them in line, I don't care if it's a grocery store line, anyone who is somewhere in the distance where I'm trying to get to, I'm all ears. I'm open to what they have to share. And today, we're very blessed to have Maurice W. Dorsey. He's an author. He is the 4 times, I think it's 3 books, and maybe more, but we'll find out for sure. Here are some of the books. From Whence We Come, which is a novel based upon a true story. Businessman First, remembering Henry G. Parks Jr. I did a little research on him this morning, so we'll get into that. Capturing the Life of a Businessman Who Was African American. This book is a biography. And then Of Time and Spirit. This is his 3rd book since his retirement from the United States Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture back in 2012. Since then, he's been a writer, public speaker, historian, and he is an avid advocate for the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. Ring my bell. Okay, don't get me singing up in here today. Also, he's a graduate of the University of Maryland, College Park, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in Family and Consumer Sciences, also a doctorate in Philosophy and Education, a master's degree in Arts and Sciences from the Johns Hopkins University, and last but not least, a master's degree in Education from Loyola University of Maryland. So I just think that's just the best little if that doesn't get you going, I don't know what will, but we're going to find it if it hasn't happened yet. Because guess what? Put your hearts together, put your hearts on the screen, put some love and light into this, and let's bring him to the stage. Here he comes, Maurice W. Dorsey. Well, good morning.
Well, good morning, sir. How are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm outstanding. Happy Valentine's Day to you in advance.
Thank you. That came up last night. Oh my goodness, it's so interesting that you bring that up. My husband Brian and I were watching. We watched something, and just out of nowhere, because I don't believe anything is out of nowhere. So where's the deceive? I do this as a little disclaimer. But we were sitting there, and he said something about. Oh, I asked if he had made the dinner reservation for our favorite place because we just are able to go back out to eat just recently, a couple of weeks ago, I think, here in Chicago. Anyway, he said something about, we were watching a show and they were in the recording studio. And when we first met, I was just going in the studio to start that album, and he would come with me. And he was like, oh, I remember. I said, listen, I only drugged you there so I could impress you. But he was like, well, but that was like one of the greatest moments of our courtship. Don't you feel the same way? And there it was. I was like, because I was like getting sleepy already, because I go to bed at 9:30. He goes to bed at like midnight. So I'm like, okay, yeah, it was good. And I go back to, he turned the TV off. But anyway, Valentine's Day. Yes, happy Valentine's Day to you too. This married life is something else. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But we've been together 7, and this year we'll be married 5.
Okay, congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. My everything. I didn't think it ever happened. I'll tell you that. I didn't think it would ever happen, but God has a plan, and we are a part of it. So tell everybody where you're at in the world, Dr. Dorsey. What should I call you?
Maurice. Maurice is fine. When it said type in screen name, I just did the whole thing just because there are a number of Maurice Dorseys in the world. But I'm Maurice Dorsey, everybody. I'm in Washington, D.C. this morning. It's very cloudy and cold here. It's not supposed to get above too much above 34 degrees here today. Not quite like Chicago. But yeah. I'm an author. I'm retired. I worked for 42 consecutive years in both the public and private sector. I retired from the United States Department of Agriculture, one of the last places on earth I ever thought I would end up retiring from, considering my progression in life, but as far as career is concerned. But in my retirement, I've written 3 books. The first book I wrote was a biography about Henry Parks. Henry Parks was a very well-known African-American businessman who was the first African-American to ever issue stock publicly on the New York Stock Exchange. He was fairly well known on the East Coast of the United States, but he had originally planned this business from Baltimore, Maryland, was the home base, for Southern blacks in the 40s and 50s and 60s, because black people tended to eat pork and heavy foods for breakfast in the morning because they had more laborious kinds of job and laborious kinds of work to do. And when he built his refrigeration plant for this sausage and pork manufacturing business, the Ku Klux Klan burned the building down and said that they didn't want any of his here in the South. So rather than be defeated, he took the adversity and turned it around and moved his business north. So he did Baltimore, Delaware, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and he had subsidiary offices in each place in the Northwest. And one of the things that was unique about him being African American, and why I include that on the cover of the book, is because so many African Americans on the East Coast where this product was sold never knew that he was African American. And it was because he didn't sell his face. He was a very handsome man, but he was also an African American man.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, but he was competing in a very competitive market. And
Mm.
very often, when he would try to market his product, they would say, "We don't want your in sausage here." And so he ended up having to sell the product and not his name. And so he stayed behind the scene in order to enter into the bigger competitive market. And subsequently,
Mm.
Domino Pizza and Pizza Hut purchased their sausage for him. And he never posted a losing year from the time he started the building and started building this company to multi-million dollar rankings in the competitive market. And he died in 1989, and then it was taken over by his general manager and some other company employees. But Henry was the creator, the builder, and the founder. And in addition, he worked he could not get money to build his corporation in Baltimore. He had to go to Pennsylvania. It was the first Pennsylvania bank who
Mhm.
loaned him the money to start his company in Baltimore. And there was a story behind that because there was a businessman named Willie Adams who was very well known in Baltimore. He was a numbers runner, actually.
Ooh,
That was before the Maryland
scandalous.
State Lottery, and he provided funding for the company as well. But anyway, there was 30 years difference between Henry's age and my age, and we became really good friends. He began to
I
mentor
was going to
me.
ask you. Sounds like
Yeah,
you knew him.
yeah, I knew him personally very well, and he took me to the fanciest places and introduced me to Black society because I didn't come from a very wealthy family. And he exposed me to the workings of Baltimore City, New York, Philadelphia, where his plants were. The book. I presented this book at the Harlem Book Festival, and it was a finalist in the
Ooh.
Harlem Book Festival Awards, what they call the QEB Awards, the Black Quarterly magazine. So I'm really happy with the book. It could have been, there are photographs in the book, and it's a chronology in the book, and it tells a lot about his childhood, some of the very painful experiences he had because he was born in Atlanta, Georgia, but his father, who was Henry Park Sr., moved the family to Dayton, Ohio, to go above the Mason-Dixon line uh, to not have to deal with the segregation, racism, and prejudice that many African Americans, or at that day and time, colored or Negro, had to go through at that point in time. So,
Mhm.
so anyway, from there, he went to New York and he started a couple of businesses, and then he came to Baltimore and started this sausage business. So he went to Ohio State University, so he had credentials in business and marketing. He was a roommate of Jesse Owens, the triathlete.
Oh.
In that day and time, they couldn't live on campus. They lived off campus, and they worked in the Jesse Owens worked in the dining hall serving food, as did Henry, and they were elevator operators. They weren't allowed to live on the campus, but it was Ohio State University before it became the Ohio State University, which is what it's called now. So
Okay.
Henry served on many boards, the Grace Company in New York, and um, uh, I'm blanking on some of them now, but he was, the book has all of the listing of many boards. He was on the board of directors, and very often in the 50s and 60s, he was the first and the only Black to serve on these boards and direct. So that was book number one.
Mhm.
Book
Wait, question before you go into book number 2 so I can be fully present. Because the whole time, well, let me just ask you a question. You working in the Department of Agriculture. Were you right down the hall from the FDA or in the same building? Did you know anybody in the Food and Drug Administration?
Well, no, because we had
Mhm.
10,000 people in that building. There were 10,000 people in the 14th and Independence building. If you can imagine 10,000 people in one
In one
building,
building.
in one building. So you had all of the agencies. You had the dairy, the meat, the vegetable, the community service, the 4-H, and
That's what it is. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to figure out something because I'm sitting here looking at the screen and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Mr. Dorsey is going to be 74 in May, and I'm 58 right now. And I'm looking, I'm like, wait a minute. I thought I was doing well, because if I
You
said,
are doing well. You are
uh-huh,
doing
yeah, right. How come you don't have it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you knew some
because
secrets.
I have a chemistry set on my bathroom vanity.
I know that's right. Oh, same one my husband has. The
There's
one that
chemicals
requires
all
its
over
own
the place.
carry-on luggage. No, seriously, my husband actually has a carry-on when we travel that is nothing but product. Creams, and I'm not kidding, but that's why he
I
looks like a little Michael J.
tell me
Fox.
about it.
You
So
look great.
thank you. It's a war. It's a war, but you look great too.
Yeah, well, then I should be waving the white flag because
And then
clearly
also
I've lost.
I'm
Huh?
retired now. You have to keep in mind I'm retired, so now I can afford more hours of beauty rest.
I know that's right. I'm looking forward to that day myself. So I just had to get that out there because I kept going through it and I was like, how in the world? Okay, so good job. Thank you for those tips. What about the second book?
Well, now the second book is called From Whence We Come. It's a novel based off of a true story, and it's basically my true story, and it's about my relationship principally in my family, but principally with my mother and father, and my coming out as a gay African American gay man to my mother.
What year
Uh,
was that?
oh my God,
Do you
how many
remember?
years? It was 1971 that I came out to my mother and father. That was the biggest hurdle for me to more or less overcome because I didn't particularly care about anybody else knowing. I knew when I was 4 years old that my proclivities were toward men. I always knew that.
Hmm.
But I was born Catholic in the Catholic Church, and my grandmother was devout Catholic, and we went to Catholic Church and we went to Mass and Communion and didn't eat meat on Friday, the whole kit and caboodle with the Catholic Church. My dad was in the military for the early part of his career. And so we lived in a military environment for the most part. But it was segregated because, in early American history, the Army was the only place an African American uh, man could join the armed forces. The Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Navy didn't even include African Americans unless maybe they were cooks or something like that. So the
Hmm.
Army was the only outlet. But the book is more or less me coming to terms with my gayness with my mother and father, who are now both deceased, of course, with me now being 70, 73, 74. And but they, in retrospect, and now, especially with this COVID, you think back over your life, you have this time where you're sort of shut in, shut down, shut out, and your mind, you reflect on various things. But my mother, I kind of thought she knew, but it was with her being a Christian woman or going to church, and the ladies in the church wanting to mate their daughters with someone they thought was acceptable,
Hmm.
and they saw me as acceptable,
I
gentlemen to
know
go
they did.
with their daughters. And my mother didn't want to tell them that I was gay, but she had to more or less kind of put them off. But anyway, after I met my first partner, and I've only had two long-term live-in partners, uh, both are deceased now, but then, and I had gotten my college degree, my first degree from University of Maryland in College Park. I got tired of living the lie and the deceitfulness and, trying to cover up with your parents,
Hmm.
who were my backbone. I mean, they supported me, took care of me, paid for my college, my tuition, my clothes, my everything. I mean, they took care of me and protected me. So, I mean, you can't lie to them forever. At least I couldn't, because it was weighing on me. So From Whence We Come tells my journey of coming to terms with that and facing my mother especially. And the key thing is, once I went home and told my parents, my dad already knew, but he
Oh.
just, I mean, and he had a military background, I mean, but his feeling and his philosophy was pretty much, under the circumstances in which men are not exposed to women and they've been separated from them for a very long time, under the
Mm-hmm.
right circumstances, men do a whole bunch of things, well, women too, for that matter. Yeah, I like that expression.
Scandal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but we're human beings. I mean, so
that's right.
we do certain things. So it was a little bit tumultuous, and it was crying and tears, and what did I do wrong? And I breastfed all of my children, and the whole
Uh-huh.
whip that I felt was being put on me, but I was trying to release myself and become free, because it was I was born in 1947, so I mean it was still where I lived in Maryland, a great deal of segregation, a lot of racism, a lot of prejudice, a lot of discrimination. We lived in segregated housing, and then we lived in integrated housing. Then I took a bus to go to public schools. And then they integrated schools in '64, which in my county, it was 10 years after Brown versus Board of Education that the county finally
Got with it.
integrated the school. So then I was the only Black person in my class of 460 seniors, the only one in the 11th and 12th grade, because that was a huge transition. Then when I went to College Park, the College Park campus had 30,000 students, which that included the commuter population, but that was bigger than the hometown that I lived in. So so all of us have our journeys, whether we're straight or gay or Black or white or Christian or Jewish or whatever. I'm telling from whence we come, from my version, and how it impacted me, trying to overcome the institutionalization of having my identity change from my birth certificate, which said colored in the 40s, to the 50s. To the 50s, we became Negroes. In the 60s, James Brown said we were Black and we were proud. Then in the 70s or 80s, we became African American. So for every 10 years, every decade of my life, my identity was being changed, And then you're in a community where people, who are very fair complected didn't feel like they were Black. They didn't want to be called Black. I mean, they preferred being colored. And some wanted to be called Negro because that was with a capital N versus a small c for colored. And then when we became Black, it wasn't really an ethnicity. So grammatically speaking, it was considered like a color. And since white people weren't spelled with a capital W. They didn't feel Black. So that whole identity thing of my journey of coming through, trying to unravel the Catholic Church, unravel my gayness, I mean, it's for some individuals,
A bit
they
much.
handle it, but many of us fall through the cracks. Many of us can't handle the amount of oppression and certain such situations that we go through in life. So anyway,
No, I could sit here listening to this all day, but I do have one question, because I
Yes.
think I think I'm gonna nail this one. Did it kind of go down like this? First of all, did you tell your parents at the same time?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so your mother, were the first 3 words out of her mouth, did it go a little like, "Oh Jesus, no! Oh Lord,"
Let me. It's in the book. It's in the book from whence we come. I can describe the scene. We're in the living room of my mother and father's home, and they were only able to build a home. We lived in an apartment before they built a home in 1960, but it was a very nice 3-bedroom rancher with a double car carport, so forth, on 3/4 acres of land in a rural community. But anyway, I waited until I finished high school and college before I decided that I would tell my parents that I was gay. And I used to tease them after I became an adult and say, well, I wanted to make sure you all finished paying all these student loans.
I know that's right. Right.
I used to tease them like that. I mean, we had a great sense of humor. But anyway, the scene was in the living room, and we had this picture window. And, I came home and I told them, and my mother she just immediately started crying. And what did I do wrong? I
Isn't that
breastfed all of
interesting?
my children. She didn't want to accept any responsibility for me being gay. I mean, because her role, I guess, as she saw it as a mother, was to see to it that I was upright. But I was a mother's boy. I mean, I loved my dad. My dad loved me. It was unquestionable. Unquestionable. We'll talk about that in the third book. But my mother and I did everything together, and I think she could have known, but she just didn't want to see it. And I think she had probably been exposed to boys being boys, and maybe you just grow out of it. You get a girl.
A phase.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, a phase, and you're going to grow out of it. And so, I mean, I think she tried to dismiss it in as many ways as she could. But she cried, and then when she cried, I cried, because you don't want to see your mother crying, and you don't want to be the cause of your mother crying.
Right.
But my dad was completely vertical, upright, looking at this show between my mother and I. And I'm trying to tell her, you didn't do anything wrong. I was born this way. You didn't do any. I was trying to remove her guilt, but I was trying to release myself to be who I was. I mean, and not live this lie of deception and deceit, and not being able to tell her. And what made me tell her on that particular occasion was that I went to this gay club in Baltimore, and it was the first time I had ever been in the company of an all men. And I mean, to me, it was just the most exciting thing, to see this, because I grew up in a rural area. I mean, you didn't have anything like that.
I remember that day.
Yeah, and in high school, being the only black, blacks and whites didn't intermingle that much in my day and time. And then when I went to College Park, I had a single room because whites didn't want to live with me in the dormitory, so I had a single room in the dormitory, which I didn't really care about that, because I was sort of fastidious in the way I wanted to have my room.
Oh, I already know. I bet that room was laid out.
And so after I had come from this gay club and this gay party, and and I had such a good time, and my mother and I spoke on the phone every Saturday morning that God sent when I was away from home. We talked on the phone like for hours. I mean, just literally hours. We were just on and on and on about nothing. And I said, "Oh, Mother, I went to this great party last night." My mother says, "Well, who is she? Who did you take?"
Oh, Lord, I remember that.
God, I mean, so it's deception. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. So I just said, "Look, are you all going to be home? I just wanted to get it. I wanted to get it off of my shoulders." So it was quite traumatic for my mother and I, but it wasn't for my dad, because he knew.
Interesting. That is so interesting. Just goes. Right.
Usually it's the reverse. Generally, the mothers, from my experience, tend to be.
Oh, my baby. Yeah, right.
But the fathers tend to, and especially in my experience, black fathers. I mean, their male identity is associated with that.
Correct. And
to have a gay son, it sort of reflects on them in their head. But my dad absolutely didn't. I mean, he just didn't. He was unmoved, unfazed. And
usually it's the mother who said, "Oh, I've been knew that." Boy, I knew when you was like stealing diapers. I knew. Yeah. But and the father isn't clueless usually, and yours was completely reversed. Interesting.
So I was really blessed, but I mean, my dad seemed to bring peace and harmony to my mother and I, and I made her feel that she wasn't responsible. It wasn't anything that she did, which she didn't. It just was. That was the way I came out. And
right. That's just it.
Yeah, and I'm happy. I was happy. And then after I had a stable relationship for 22 years, and left that relationship, she wanted to know why.
Oh yeah.
They wanted to know, well, why are you leaving this stable relationship? And anyway, Lauren, I'm really quite long-winded, and so when you need to interrupt,
I'm getting ready to, because I want to go to break. But I'm gonna tell you something. Yeah. Oh, we're very similar. Everybody, I heard y'all. They said, boy, similar. Right. And when you said long-winded, they all went, they ain't long-winded. Have you known Lauren long? So anyway, when we come back from our short break, a couple things I want to ask you about, because you lived through it somewhat. And you're in that range. You're going to know what I mean here in a second. When I ask you, I want to hear your take on what it was like to live during the paper bag test era. You know about the paper bag test. We're gonna get, yeah, y'all about to get schooled on something. And then it's so interesting because later today I have a podcast. Brian and I have been selected to be like what do you call those people? Brand ambassadors for a new brand that is LGBTQ allies. They're not gay. They're special forces from all of the military, Green Berets and stuff, but they have a line, and it's called the Unity line. And it's you guys will hear more about that next week when it's launched. But anyway, Stonewall, and one of the shirts I have to wear is Stonewall, established 1969, and it was interesting that you said you came out in 1972. So I'd love to hear your take on what was going through your mind when that all took off in 69, and then if it did in fact help to encourage you to just come on out in 1972. Those questions and more when we return, and I invite all of you to get your questions and comments together, get them ready, and we'll be back in just 2 minutes. Don't you dare go away.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the show. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome back. We have just been through a wonderful half hour with my guest today, Dr. Maurice W. Dorsey. And I want to say thank you before we go back into the broadcast inside the studio with Maurice. I want to say thank you to my sponsors for the week, Jennifer J. Hammond. Take a look at that every chance you get. There's more information on all of my pages regarding Jennifer J. Hammond's summit that's coming up. I'm one of the speakers there, and you can catch Jennifer every day, Monday through Friday, on Sirius XM on the Urban Network. So check her out. And also to Intention Pins. IntentionPin.com is where you go to get one of these. Mine is engraved with "Through Me, Not From Me," because I believe that everything we have to offer the world comes to us only on its way through us. We are merely whistle stops. So get your hands off the wheel and let it flow. Let it flow. So thank you to all of my sponsors, and Dr. Dorsey is back with us. Welcome back. Welcome back. Now, we're going to talk about your third book. Let's do that first. Okay,
Okay.
and if there's a tie-in in there or not, we'll still come back. I want to hear about Stonewall, and I want to hear about the Brown, the paper bag test, because you can school us on that one. So here's your third book of Time and
Yes. Well,
Spirit, a tribute.
yes, of Time and Spirit, I think probably is my most well researched book, where I actually had
Ooh.
to become uh, a stronger writer in there. So a lot of documentation, and in fact, on one of the podcasts that I've done with Don Brightman, whom referred me to you,
I
he
know
was
that. Yes.
after having written that book, you need to call yourself a historian as well. But anyway, it's a tribute to the book is a tribute to my father. My father was James Roswell Dorsey Sr. And he as I was saying earlier, was born Catholic in a large family. There were 7 or 8 children, and
Ooh.
he was a very studious classical man, and his parents sent him to Catholic schools, but he had a very the Catholic schools were so strict. My dad had a problem when he transferred from primary school to go to the Frederick Douglass High School in Baltimore, which was the public high school. Um, but anyway, he lived his life. He was very accomplished. He was very classical. He loved music. He loved art. He loved theater. He was a great reader. He was a great provider. He and my mother were married for 62 years. He, you know,
Wow.
very strong in the community. He worked with the PTA and the scholarship fund. He knew the school teachers. But we lived in a rural setting. And in my opinion, he was, you know, my dad was sort of a large fish in a small pond. You know, I mean, because the community was so small, and we had less than 10% Black people living in this particular county in Maryland. And and we all pretty much knew each other and went to school. But over his years, in his late 70s, and in the 90s, when home personal computers were becoming more popular, my dad wanted to write his own story.
Mm.
But because of poor health and age and things that happen to us when we get to our 80s and 90s and so forth, he was unable to do it. But he had this collection of materials, boxes of just notes and journals and certificates and awards,
Ooh.
plaques and stuff that he had accumulated over the years, and he wanted to sort of aggregate that and tell a personal story. But very different from me. My dad was not. He was not self-centered. He was very stoic. He was very down to earth, very plain, very simple, non-materialistic. Um, so anyway, when he finally passed away in 2000, and uh, my mother was cleaning out the house, and she says, "Well, look, just take all that junk out of here, because I mean, I'm too old." Because at this point, she was in her 80s too, and she felt like she wasn't going to write the book, and so I couldn't throw away
Right.
the material. I mean, I mean, my dad and I didn't get close until I was pretty close to in my 40s. I mean, he was always present. We always had dinner together every day as a family. I had a brother and a sister, rather, I have a brother and a sister. And, you know, we had that old fashioned family setting, but he was just a very quiet, introverted, internal person. And to me, he was very difficult to reach, because with my mother, we talked all of the time. I mean, it was just incessant. You know, I mean, I mean, I would visit my parents and have dinner with them on Friday after work. And we'd sit at the kitchen table and have dinner at, you know, 6 or 7 o'clock. And my dad went to bed religiously at 10 o'clock every night of his life that I knew him. And he would wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and my mother and I would still be sitting in the living room on the Duncan Fife sofa, just chatting and talking. And he'd look and he says, "Are you still here? And have you been home?" And I hadn't been home. My mother and I would have talked the whole night, you know, but my dad and I weren't that close. But one of the things that was just sort of important to me about my dad is just that he accepted my difference in an environment and in a time when homosexuality, gay life, gay living was so frowned upon. It was frowned upon in the Catholic Church. It was, you know, it was frowned upon in the straight community. It was frowned upon in conservative communities, because I lived in a rural county for the most
Right.
part. and it was
Everybody walking around in overalls.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you almost had to live in secrecy, live in denial. You had to watch what colors. Like if I wanted to wear a yellow shirt, boys didn't wear yellow, and when Bermuda shorts became popular for men, I wanted them, and boys didn't wear Bermuda shorts. I mean, there were all of these stigmas associated with your masculinity. And you had to walk a certain way, your voice had to be low, and my hands couldn't be moving around. I mean, there was
Right.
just a rigid social order as to how a man conducted themselves. And I never wanted to conform to any of them. I just wanted to be me. I mean, and just take what you want, and the rest, if you don't want it, just stay away. And if you don't like me, I didn't care. But it was important to me with my father. And so,
Wait, and I just let me just jump in and say this because I can't get it off my head. It's in there. Interestingly enough, but I want to say because when I met my birth mother, I was 32. The first day, the very first day, it was like maybe 3 hours into us knowing each other, right? Since a week old, and
okay,
I had a day planner. Those ones that you
right,
zip them up or whatever. And this
right,
is and she kept looking, and she was like, "What's that?" I was like, "It's my day planner." She was like, "Well, from what they tell me, only them gay ones carry those." I said, "That's exactly what the sign said in the aisle at Walmart. Gay
right,
accessories. How'd you
yeah,
know?" And she was like,
yeah,
"Ooh, you
yeah,
got a
yeah,
smart little mouth on you, don't you?" Right. But she was the one who encouraged me to just quit living behind the curtain.
right, right,
But that was what she knew. Raised
yeah,
in
yeah.
Arkansas.
Yeah, well, see, my dad didn't encourage it because he still had to live with my mother.
Oh, yeah.
But
She's
so it was the balancing between accepting his son and pleasing his wife, who he was married to for 62
right.
years.
Which way
So
do you
I mean,
go? Where do you go?
he had to balance. So he didn't encourage it. But one of the things that I'm really grateful for about both of my parents is that they didn't force me into being some parents say you've got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer, you have to be a captain in the army, you have to carry on some family tradition. And I
Hmm.
was allowed to be myself. The only shortcoming with that is that I was just an average student. I was a C student, and I remember, and my sister was valedictorian of the class. She was like really smart, got all of the accolades in the family for her academic grades and her academic performance. And so and it was 6 years difference in her age and my age. But
Okay.
I happened to question my science teacher one day with a grade that I had, and she said to me, because I had gotten a C and I kind of thought I deserved a B, and so she says, well, looked at me and she says, well, Maurice, I don't see what you're complaining about. A C is a good grade. Well, I took that the wrong way because then C was good, and for me, good became good enough, and so
Mm.
I never reached higher to have A's and B's. She said C was good, and I said, well, if C is good, then good is going to be good enough for me. And so I
Right.
did,
You like it? I love it.
yeah, and I did, I mean, I wasn't aspiring to be the smartest or the brightest. I just was a happy person and high spirited, high energy. I felt like I was positive. I was friendly. I got along. I mean, I won't say I necessarily had friends, but I got
Mhm.
along with people very well. And so anyway, but back to the book. But my dad, what he was, even though we weren't close, what he absolutely was a great role model because he read all of the time. He took me to museums. He talked. He played classical music. We had and the music that we had in our home, I never heard in a number of homes in the segregated Black community that we lived in. Um, I mean, we had Beethoven and Strauss and Haydn, and he loved Broadway plays and musicals, My Fair Lady, The King and I, Porgy and Bess, The Sound of Music, and on, Kismet, and on and on and on. And
So,
then,
so did other Black families in your community, did they look at y'all as bougie? Like, oh, them Dorseys. They think they all that kind
well,
of thing. Because
it's
like,
very interesting you say that. It only occurred to me just in the past few years. One of our old neighbors from many years ago, who was a friend of mine, said to me, you know, you Dorseys always thought you were better than everybody else.
Hmm.
I never heard that undercurrent, but I did feel the distinction very acutely. Not that I thought we were better, but the difference when it was bougie is that my mother was from Washington, D.C. She was born and reared in Washington, D.C. My dad was born and reared in Baltimore, Maryland. I had two urban parents, you know, who went to museums and music. And, you know, when my mother was in DC, that was when women began to go to work after, you know, during World War II. And my
Hmm.
mother wanted to go to work, and women were beginning to become school teachers and get jobs out of the home. So their point of reference was more urban, and they were more exposed to cultural
Culture. Hmm.
and literary kinds of things that the rural community didn't offer. You know, it didn't have the museums and the art galleries and the
Uh-huh.
musical performances and the opera house and those kinds of things. So we were different.
Were
But
your parents both? I'm sorry. Were both your parents? Were they pretty fair skinned?
well, my mother was pretty fair, more fair than me. This is an interesting point too. That's also in the book. My dad was my complexion. But I never knew that my dad had a complex for being this dark as I am,
See.
because he always said his grandmother on his father's side always discriminated against him for being too dark. And
Yeah.
his siblings, his older sister and brother were very fair complected. And my father, and when I found that out, I absolutely laughed. I said, "Are you out of your mind?" I said, "Now you can have a complex about your complexion, but I'm not having a complex about mine because I love my coloring." You know, I mean, I was trying to boost him. I mean, just the absurdity of this whole color thing. But
Well,
and
that's where I'm leading to that paper bag thing.
well,
Because
and it
I
was
wonder, did it start outside of us or did we create it inside because of the Rosa Parks story and whatnot about how, that's how they chose her?
well, I think it goes back to slavery in some respects, in some regards. I mean, the fair complected people got the kitchen jobs and the house jobs and the inside jobs, whereas the darker brown people of our
Get out
race
in the field.
were outside in the field picking cotton, whatever, doing the more laborious work. So there was always a distinction, and it was the same case with Thomas Jefferson and Sally Henning,
Mhm.
and all of these children. But they were sleeping with women, the slave women or the women of color, during that era, and
Yep.
creating children. Um, but my grandmother was very, very fair, and I remember playing with when she was in her 70s, playing with the skin up underneath of her upper arm, because it gets soft and a little
Hmm.
mushy. As a kid, I used to come and play with it, but I never felt discriminated like my dad did in the family. But on the other hand, I was so precocious and in love with myself. I didn't need
Okay.
the validation. I mean, I didn't need the validation. I was satisfied. I mean, because I was comfortable and safe and had food, clothing, and
Hmm.
shelter. But the paperback thing, I mean, I did witness it, and I mean,
It
I
was a
even
real
saw
thing. Yeah.
parents who had darker children who treated the lighter complected children better than
Hmm.
their darker child. And they were the,
Hmm.
they were the
Hmm.
mother. We had a next door neighbor, and she definitely discriminated in my eyes, toward
Anybody darker.
one of her boy children,
Hmm.
because the other three came out really, very
Very.
fair. So
Let
I
me.
mean, it's embedded, I mean, it is embedded in our culture and in our history. And I think some of it
It is, and it's
we
still there in a lot of
Yeah, oh
places.
yeah, it's absolutely still
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
their cultures on the Geechee people, and their cultures in Ohio, where very fair complected people all congregate. I have a friend here in this city, and when I look at her Facebook page, every single one of the people on her Facebook page are fair, are light. There are
Light
no, I mean, on her Facebook page, there are no, and she's my age, you know, and I mean, I think that's kind of startling to me.
I see it. I look for it.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting.
And I say to her, you know, I'm really surprised that you even include me as a friend, but I'm not on her Facebook page either.
See, you ain't made the
So,
cut yet.
you know, I mean, I'm
You
just
better get a
surprised that
brown
she
paper
even
bag, put it up, check it out.
talks to me. But yes, it goes on today. But you
It
know,
does.
it's a shame that we do it to each other because for the past 4 years, it has been done to us on the other from the other side, and I'm talking about Washington D.C. and the White House for
Yes,
you know
yes.
the past 4 years. So I mean, the brown paper bag. Uh, I mean, it was true in the environment that I grew up in, and the population was Republican. It was a Republican county. It was a very conservative,
Mhm,
tightly
mhm.
laced county of rules. I mean, Main Street was for the whites, and Bond Street was for the blacks. I mean, the black businesses, and D.C. was the same way. 14th Street in D.C. was the black business community. Connecticut Avenue was the white business community historically. And when
Right.
the rise of '68 came through, you know, I mean, it was because of that. I mean, and blacks lived in northeast and southeast DC, and the whites lived in upper northwest.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
demographically today in Washington DC, 90% of the white people that live in Washington DC live in the upper northwest quadrant, and 90% of the blacks who live in the District of Columbia lines live in the southeast northeast quadrant. So if you
Right.
just drew a line diagonally across the city, you can see the disparity. It's only downtown where the government office buildings and the museums are that you see the diversity and the interaction. But to me, it's still one of the safest cities for an African American gay man. We're pretty liberal and accepting overall. You know,
That's awesome. Well, look, we get about 6 minutes left, and I want to ask you um, about what do you remember about 1969 in Stonewall? Do you feel that how did that affect your decision to, you know, come on out?
well, it's a very good question, Lauren. To me, I had mixed emotions about it. There was a group very active here in Washington D.C. and Baltimore called ACT UP, and they were a little bit
Oh
more
yeah,
militant. And I wasn't. I was more of the Martin Luther King model of nonviolence, but I have grown to see that sometimes you have to exert pressure on the issue to bring attention to the issue in order to get change. And I think that Stonewall brought the change, though I hated the fact that we, meaning LGBT uh, people, had to be victimized with billy clubs and dogs and fire hoses
right.
and brutalized and locked up and have cameras exposed all of us to bring about the change. And so I mean, I think it was very valuable, uh, and I really would have preferred it not having had the violence in order to bring the change. But
Right.
sometimes I mean, I just think, I mean, it was sort of like with Malcolm X. I felt the same way. I mean, the Black Panthers sort of scared me at first, but I mean, you have to call attention to the problem because some people don't respond until they see that it's a problem, and they're
Exactly.
not going to hear it. I mean, and I think this country right now is going through the exact same thing. I mean, when you think of 74 million, was it 74 million people who voted for the last president, not this current president, you know, Trump,
Right.
and that's a lot of people. So I mean, it's a lot of polarization in this country, and I mean, it's been there. I mean, and you know, we've changed the laws and the policies, but the hearts and minds and soul and the fabric of the people have not changed.
Right.
But the good thing is we can overcome through all of this diversity. That's what my body of work and my writing is. You can have all of these things, but you can overcome, you can achieve, and you can be something. You can, uh, you know, you can create a
Do it
world for
all.
you. Yeah.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah.
That's right. Well, let's see. We got 3 minutes left, and I want you to play a quick game with me so that we can put another name in the hopper for our prize bundle awarded at the last day of the month that we're on the air. And so I'm going to spin this wheel right here, and it's going to land on blue, which means you. Let's see. Today, blue is, where is it? Oh, okay. Trivia. So I have a trivia question. Are you ready?
Your sound went away.
My sound did?
Your sound went away.
I wonder why.
Your sound went away.
Wait. Is it back?
Yeah.
That's weird. Okay, well,
your sound went away. I couldn't hear you. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay,
and
here's
I
your
saw
question.
The go around, and I knew that it was quiz, but then the sound went
Just
away.
left. Okay,
Yeah.
well, it's back. So here's your question. In 1969, Parks, the one you wrote the book about,
yes,
became the first African American to serve on the board of trustees for which college in Baltimore?
Goucher.
Oh, shoot. I thought I was picking a hard one. Yay, you got it. Can you see the name? Man, that was right. You didn't even hesitate. So can you see?
I knew him. One of my reviewers said that I probably am the expert on Henry Parks. And you know, and I feel really bad that he doesn't get the kind of national exposure. But you know, business and entrepreneurship is not an area. I mean, we have excelled in education and politics and entertainment and sports, but business and entrepreneurship, we're still on that uphill trajectory of having more business ownership and owning our communities. And I thought Henry did a great job at building the Black community by putting money in the Black community.
Well, I want everybody to get, I'm going to throw those connectors on the screen in just a moment. Can you pick a number between 1 and 10 for me?
10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Narinder Pun in Singapore. Congratulations, Narinder. I'm adding your name to the hopper. And if you're present the last show of the month, which will be actually on Friday the 26th. So far, Michelle, Marie, Virginia Hodges, and Narinder Pun, it's you three. There'll be a couple more before we hit that last day. Dr. Dorsey, I want to thank you so much for coming aboard today and sharing the story about your wonderful books, your dad, Mr. Parks. And if people want to continue the dialogue with you or see more things, Maurice W. Dorsey, head over to the website, mauricewdorsey.com, which is on your screen right now. Or if Facebook or Instagram is more your jam, find him at Maurice W. Dorsey. So I'm going to put those up, leave them up as we get out of here. Dr. Dorsey, again, thank you so much. And I'd love to have you back again sometime if you're open to that.
I would love to come. Thank you very much for your work and your entrepreneurship. I'm really so impressed, and I've looked at many of your tapes, and they're just absolutely wonderful. And you bring so much energy to this, so I'm very proud of you. Considering I'm the elder here,
I know, and I never get that. So that's like, thank you so much. And I want you to know, I have a new show coming out next month, LGBTQ. Answering the questions behind the screen, just like some of the ones that you brought light to today. And I want to invite you to be one of my first guests on the Other Side of the Rainbow, where we give people knowledge and insight, and we talk about things that I never knew that. So I know you got a lot, so I want you in on that. Hang out in the green room. I want to say something to you before we leave. If you got 2 minutes.
Yes, I do.
I'm going to drop you back in. Okay. And you guys, happy Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. Please, please, and please again, get out there and do what we do. Love up on everyone you can. Just love up on everyone you can. Every situation you encounter, try to make that person or that situation just a tad bit better than the way you found it. If you just get up and are cognizant every day of becoming the blessing in the world that you'd like to see, one of these days, you lo and behold, out of the corner of your eye, you're going to see exactly what you've planted. Get out there and be the fruit. I love you guys. Have a wonderful weekend. Come back Monday when Andrea Malati is my guest, and we'll get it all started again. God bless you. Be out there. I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye now. Bye, Maurice. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
tomorrow.